Okay, morning everybody. Don't let this tie fool you. It might be a one and only thing. So I'm still the same casual guy that talks to a lot of you guys daily. Yeah, I'm here to talk about the Rem side of things. For the most part, I think the majority of you guys are very familiar with what reclamation remediation is. And I guess you've got a lot of questions on how is this going to transition over from SRD environment to the AER. It was a really good task, and it would have been nice had this occurred maybe a little bit later after the merger between environment and SRD, because really there was we followed the same policy at both for Rem, but we did a lot of things maybe a little bit differently on the land when it came to SRD and when it came to environment. So like Tristan mentioned, we really wanted to join the best of both of those two type of worlds and those regulators into this new Alberta Energy Regulator. So what are we going to be looking at the Alberta Energy Regulator? Well, we have a huge volume of work to do. We have got, right from the oil sands mines, in situ projects, thousands and thousands of kilometers of pipeline. We have gas processing plants. We have operating well sites, facilities. We have a lot of stuff out there on the land. And from the Reclamation Remediation group, or the tasks within the closure and liability, we're going to be tasked with making sure that these developments are not only constructed with the best interest on the environment, but they are closed at the end of the day and certainly meet Albertan needs as far as what we expect to see out there on the land. So I'm going to go through here, and I don't know how long it'll take, but we'll talk a little bit about some of the AER's new responsibilities when it comes to reclamation remediation. Definitely some definitions and a little bit more explanation about what exactly is reclamation and remediation. The touch points within the AER, Tristan showed the diagram of the new org structure, the matrix design. Reclamation remediation is a life cycle approach, and it touches all the different aspects of our matrix design. It's certainly not just a closure liability function. It will touch throughout, and I'll explain that a little bit more with some slides. Overview of the process, maybe that's really what you're here for more, is what's going to be different for you folks and what's going to be the same. And if I touch just on that, I mean probably 2 slides and we'd be out of here, because there's not going to be a whole lot that changes, certainly in the immediate future, but I think we have the opportunity to really help streamline and make some efficiencies, as we get comfortable with the tasks that we have. And then I do have a couple of slides on how you folks can help. For those of you that have seen me talk before, it's always, we're here to help you. So, you guys have to be able to help us as well and to help Albertans get to where we need to be. So this is the Phase 3, March 29th, 2014, the EPEA and Water Act transferred to the Alberta Energy Regulator as they relate to all energy development. And this does include reclamation remediation. I was kind of glad to see that we moved off of that April 1st date, because this may have been just the most elaborate April Fool's joke going. But now that we've changed that, we've kind of cleared that up, and we are still going forward with this. So what are some of the new responsibilities that we have? Again, this is a reclamation remediation, but we cannot forget conservation. And when I speak to conservation, I'm not speaking to the terminology, the old terminology from the ERCB of conservation, which is conservation of the resource. Making sure that when you're building a coal mine and you're operating a coal mine, that you're getting that resource, you're getting the majority of that resource out. What I'm talking about with conservation is conservation of reclamation materials. Making sure that you're building sites, or you're operating on sites that you maybe haven't done a lot of construction, but you're protecting those resources. So that's the conservation that I'm talking to. And then reclamation and remediation, again, of these energy resource activities. And like I said, initially that's, conventional oil and gas, oil sands, coal mines, natural gas, all of that fits within this mandate. Some of the responsibilities that the AER will be taking over that, again, ESRD had previously were reviewing, issuing, cancelling of reclamation certificates, remediation certificates. So that's going to be a big chunk of the work, but it's certainly, in my mind, it's not the most important part. The most important part is working, to properly conserve and reclaim the land. The certificate issuance and stuff, that's just an end of day, task to make sure that the liability is covered off. We will be doing assurance through field audits of certified sites, so that will remain as it currently is. We certainly want to work with you clients on managing contaminants appropriately. We do have guidelines that you all know of, but sometimes, just meeting the guidelines isn't maybe the best thing to do out there on the land. We need to really look at what we're doing, where we're doing it, and make the most appropriate decisions out there. And we will certainly respond to queries, complaints related to any conservation, reclamation, remediation matters. So that, again, is part of our role. So we do have the new organizational structure broken down into sector areas and functional areas. The sector areas being the mining, in situ, and conventional oil and gas, and we cover that entire gamut. And then the functional areas, authorizations. So the authorizations group, for the most part, is issuance of approvals, that side of things. Environment and operational performance, those that you were here yesterday would have seen a presentation from them. That's more of the compliance and assurance side of things. And the closure and liability, that's where the reclamation remediation, where the bulk of the staff dealing with the reclamation remediation will reside in. So Tristan had this up there, and really the only reason I have it up there as well is because I really want to emphasize that regardless of where the AER staff fall within this organization, whether it's authorizations on the mining side or closure liability on the oil and gas side, throughout the organization we have got a lot of experts. We have got a lot of subject matter experts. We've got a lot of science specialists, and we will certainly have the ability to reach anywhere within this organization to pull out the resources, the staff resources that we need. So there's questions about, do we have enough staff to undertake the roles that we're going to be doing? Well, maybe superficially, it doesn't appear as though we may have the appropriate staffing, but within the organization, we do have a lot of very qualified staff, and we really need to be able to leverage those individuals. So you guys are familiar with the province. We have a lot of well sites within this province. We have approximately 52,000 abandoned sites out there right now, about 46,000 inactive, so those would be the suspended wells, and about 187,000 active well sites throughout the province. So, and you can see they're right from the bottom to the top, east to west. So we have got a lot of work to do out there, or you guys have a lot of work to do out there. We got a lot of checking to do and prodding. So let's get into what exactly is reclamation remediation. It certainly is a full life cycle approach, includes all phases, right from the siting of a well, the siting of an in situ facility, right through to closure. We want to make sure that when folks are planning to work out on the land, they take into consideration the environment and where they're going to be building and operating. So planning processes is extremely important in the reclamation. Soil conservation. I have soil conservation here, but coming from SRD and being inundated with the boreal forest, woody debris, woody material conservation falls into that as well, or even vegetation conservation. In areas where we're in sensitive areas, we need to make sure that we're protecting that vegetation, and that is certainly a conservation activity. Contamination management, so that could be throughout the entire life of that facility, well, whatever it might be, making sure that any contaminants that that hit the ground, hit the air, are dealt with in an appropriate manner. Remediation and reclamation, again, it's not just an end-of-life thing. That could be throughout the entire operating phases of sites. And then we also deal with the orphan sites. There was a portion that was, the Orphan Well Association is in place, but there was a portion that ESRD historically did on the investigation side of things to identify, is there viable owners, is there not, and can these sites or should these sites be moved through to the Orphan Well Association for work. It's not a brand new thing at all by any means, this reclamation remediation. Certainly ESRD has been long involved with it, but so has the old ERCB was involved. And we're basically just going to be carrying on. We're going to be looking at the best of both worlds here and trying to make this as efficient and effective as possible, this program. So again, life cycle reclamation. Let's make sure that we plan, construct, avoid sensitive areas, do whatever we can to conserve soil during this construction, minimize our, minimize the need for remediation activities by, working appropriately and effectively on sites. Remediation certification, that comes over to the AER. Certainly it's voluntary program right now, but it is a way that industry can help to reduce some of the liability that they have out there. And then again, our group will be involved with the Reclamation Certificate Program, and that's, accepting applications, reviewing, and issuing. So how are we going to deliver this mandate with the folks that we have and all of the tasks that we have? This is a picture that I took out of a plane up in the Northeast. So anybody who hasn't been up maybe over in situ operations, this will give you a really good idea on, just the vastness of the impact that we're putting out on the landscape. This isn't a mine site. Everybody gravitates to oil sand mines for this massive footprint that's being created. But when you look at some of the other activities, such as in situ here, you've got those three-dimensional, those hiking trails that you see there. That's a 3D seismic operation. And you can just look at the amount of footprint impact that those have. Then you've got all those smaller squares throughout there. That's an oil sands exploration programs. So those are small, maybe 90 by 90 meter cuts out of the boreal forest, just for exploration purposes, to basically delineate the resource. Some of the larger squares may become, a multi-well pad site. So again, an added level of disturbance will increase the size of those. We'll do some drilling on there. We'll have to have pipelines that run to, the facilities. And then down in the bottom corner here, you can see, I think that might be a borrow pit, but the size of that, would be very similar to a central processing facility at an in situ. So you can see that we're dealing with a whole pile of things out there, and we really need to, be effective and efficient in how we're doing this. One thing that you will notice, that that gully-looking thing cutting through the middle, that's a patterned fen. So that's a peatland complex that, we're not avoiding that. The seismic lines are running through that. The core holes may be situated within that. So we're also looking at, all different land use types throughout this disturbance. So it is a big mandate, but I believe that we have, we have the staff and we have the people to be able to ensure that, operations are done, efficiently and effectively on these. So it brings us to the resources. Well, we have been certainly ramping up. We're next week we have a bunch of new hires coming on for the reclamation remediation side of things. We were definitely trying to get the most skilled and qualified people that we could out there. Fortunately, a lot of the staff that will be coming over to AER are ex-ESRD staff, so very familiar with the program that we had been delivering at ESRD. And that's going to be a huge benefit for all of us, that we have folks that will be able to hit the ground running, and there's not going to be a huge lag time between, to become more familiar with the program. And like I also mentioned, we'll need to touch and reach out within the organization for additional resources. I think there's a lot of communications going on between our VPs to make sure and to identify exactly how this is going to be done, but it's going to be critical. One part that seems to get lost a little bit, and Tristan certainly mentioned it, is the public land side of things, the land manager side of things. So 60% of our province is public land. The AER is responsible not only for the Public Lands Act, but EPEA, and the Rec certification is part of EPEA. So everything kind of ties together, and on 60% of this land, we at AER will not only be acting as the regulator, we will be the land manager when it comes to the energy resource activities on that land. So myself coming from SRD, that's not a big stretch, because that's what we were doing. We were acting as a dual, had a dual role as regulator and land manager. But I think for some folks within ERCB, and certainly some folks that were on the old environment side, it is a brand new thing. And it does take a little bit more. You're not just looking at rules and regulations and applying those rules and regulations. You need to step back a bit and put yourself into that landowner mentality, that, you know what, this is happening on my land. Is this really what I want? How do I want it cleaned up? What type of a land use, makes sense out here for us as land managers? So we're actually working for, the people of the province a lot more, and we need to, really think about that while we're doing our work. So part of the land manager's role, and these folks currently, the public land use officers, the public land managers, currently reside within the authorizations group of AER. Part of their role, and I don't know if their VP is here or not, I hate speaking to what their role is going to be, but their role as land managers, if there's reclamation land use changes, land use adjustments, so say it makes more sense on a grazing lease to not put it back to a certain vegetation species, and everybody's in agreement that we can adjust the land use a little bit. Those are some roles that these folks will be making, these decisions that these folks will be making. Remedial endpoint justifications. Again, we have Tier 1 and we have Tier 2, but in all cases that may not be the most appropriate action to excavate everything to a Tier 1 standard or Tier 2 standard. And as a land manager, landowner role, we can make some of those decisions that's better for the environment and still very protective. That still would be our mandate. The routine information disclosure, something that those of you that put together rec applications would be very familiar with, and it's probably a real thorn in your side. That is something that we will be delivering as well. I know there's been a bit of a, since Public Lands Act came in November and EPEA now at the end of March, there's been maybe some issues with getting proper client service on some of this, because ESRD had the files, the Public Lands Act folks were acting as a land manager, and I know I've received a bunch of questions that we're getting tossed back and forth between regulators. It's certainly not our intent, and it's not what we want to, we don't want to make things more onerous for you guys, and I think internally we're trying to rectify that and make sure that we do deliver what we need to. And then another part of their role will be issuing temporary field authorizations for any work that's, basically this will be work outside of the lease boundaries, just to make sure that when you're out there doing cleanups or you're doing reclamation, you're not in trespass. So again, this is part of the land manager's role. I've been told that the information requests, the routine information disclosures, if you go to our webpage, there isn't an email address on our webpage where those should be routed to now, rather than contacting the individual land use officers or contacting the ESRD folks. So that should hopefully streamline things a little bit and get us to where we need to be. There are also a lot of emails on the webpage with regards to the public land use managers and where the folks, the folks that need to be answering the questions. So certainly go to our webpage and utilize the email addresses that are on there, and that's where some of your questions and queries should go for day-to-day activities. Some of the touch points, some of the other touch points, I've mentioned a bit with the authorizations with the PLA folks, but there are other touch points with reclamation remediation with the authorizations branch. And some of these have to do with certainly the planning of the resource activity and where facilities will be located. Conservation construction best management practices. A lot of us have been involved in developing best management practices. What we need to do is, if we do have some of these, we need to get them into some of the approval stage of things. Some of our approvals and regulations may be a little bit outdated. We may need to do some tweaking on that, because the last thing we want to do is have you folks following a regulation that may lead you down the wrong path, or following some old approvals that may lead you down the wrong path environmentally. And this is our opportunity to look at some of those things and make some adjustments where needed. An example on the public land side would be the project approval conditioning. So through the enhanced approval process, that is now part of AER's mandate, and we are delivering that. And that certainly does contain within it a lot of reclamation related type conditions. So that's kind of where reclamation fits in with that. Certainly in the environment and operational performance, so the compliance side of things, these folks will be acting to do the initial conservation reclamation complaint response. So all complaints that come in through the 1-800 number will first be triaged, directed to the EO and P. They will do some of the initial triage work. If they are conservation reclamation specific, that maybe is outside of the expertise of the folks that are looking at it from compliance and operation, then they will send it over to our folks, and we will we will address those matters. Immediate spill response, no difference than what it was before. AER is involved with that, and the environment and operational performance folks will be the ones out doing the initial spill response. They will be conducting any investigations and inspections, and again, reclamation remediation. If they are a reclamation remediation or a conservation slant to it, our folks will be getting involved with that as well. And then some of the compliance inspections, and these would be more reclamation related. So say some of the enhanced approval process conditions that speak directly to conservation, reclamation, remediation, they will be doing the inspection of those to make sure that those approval conditions are being followed. And then the closure liability. So that's where the majority of the Rec Rem folks, science specialists will reside. Some of our mandate includes the Abandonment, License Liability Rating, Mine Financial Security Program. I think those were spoke to a little bit on Wednesday at the EPEA Water Act session. We also have the Conservation and Reclamation Compliance Assurance activities, and that's what Sandra was involved as a team lead with. The Reclamation Certification Program, the Remediation Certification Program, Remediation Management, which Sasha Desjardins was part of the team and the team lead on that, and then the Orphan well stuff that Sasha Bailey was involved with. So these are the things that Closure and Liability is taking on, and we've been doing a lot of work as part of the Regulatory Enhancement Project. So within each of those 5 areas, there are a lot of key work process areas. I'm not going to go through them, but you can have a look and see, and these are just some of the tasks that we were exploring. How do we get the information from ESRD over to the AER for all of these different types of different tasks? So I'm going to go through each of the 5 fairly briefly, but hopefully in enough detail that you guys get an idea on what exactly those tasks are, and and then I'll talk a little bit about what's different and what's staying the same. So within the Conservation and Reclamation Assurance group, the main stream to look at is down the middle. And really this is the complaint response. Again, the immediate complaint response will go through environment and operational performance, but anything to do with conservation reclamation will find its way back into the closure liability group. Class 1 pipelines is another thing that the inspections are carried out by environment and operational performance staff, but the approval review, that activity will be carried out by the conservation reclamation scope within the closure and liability. So we will have the folks doing the approvals, looking at the approval conditions for Class 1 pipelines. Most of the compliance inspections will be done through EO and P. But we really need to make sure that we have constant communication, and that's, it's going to be a test of the matrix to make sure that we are working not in silos, but that we're communicating with all of the folks within the organization. So that's something for us to be really cognizant of as we go forward. If there are concerned individuals, so this may be some of you folks, and if you have issues, regarding conservation, reclamation, remediation issues, on the land, so any stakeholder, there is a customer contact center that can certainly be utilized to direct those questions to. Or if there's complaints about the same things, we do have a 24-hour 1-800 number that should be utilized. Contaminated sites management. I know looking through the room here, there's a lot of folks that maybe do more of the remediation side of things than the reclamation side of things. So contaminated sites management is definitely something that our group is tasked with. We will be reviewing spill reports. We will be reviewing just generic remediation activities on well sites. So we will be the first contact for all of that information to review reports and help you guys, move you along the remediation process, I guess. We have a pile of sites, again, there's our province, with ongoing contamination management. Now these are ones that are known to the department. So either through a spill or, we've had, have knowledge as part of a release. So that's what these are. Or a complaint maybe has resulted in an investigation. We found some contamination out there, and we're working with clients to get these sites remediated. About 350 of these sites are active upstream oil and gas contaminated sites, and And by active, I mean that we've had, in the past, I believe it's in about the past couple of years, there's been some correspondence back and forth. A lot of these sites may be sitting in limbo, either waiting for industry to respond to questions that have been presented to them from the regulator, or additional work that's needed. So those ones aren't considered active unless we've had more response back to the department, and now we're looking at working through these issues. So these are governed by EPEA, and they will continue to be contaminated sites. We do have two different batches of staff, I would say. One is dealing with the EPEA approved facilities, so gas plants with EPEA approvals, in situ mine sites. A lot of those, as part of their approval conditions, they have ongoing soil and groundwater monitoring that needs to be done. And those reports submitted to the AER will be submitted to the AER for review, annual review. So that is one batch of individuals that we have out there. And then the second is the non-EPEA approved sites. So those would be more the upstream, pipelines, that type of thing. And again, those would be more related to spills or releases. Or they could just be routine cleanups at well center, flare pits, sumps. If there's questions that arise there, these are the staff, these non-EPEA approved contaminated site staff will be the ones dealing with those issues. The Remediation Certificate Program, it's a voluntary program, and really what it is we, when we get the applications, when the applications come into the group, we will do review, make sure that everything is, meets the appropriate standards, and then hopefully issuance of a remediation certificate. It is voluntary. It started in 2012 for the upstream. Prior to that, it was used mainly for petroleum storage tanks. The AER will not be taking on any of the downstream petroleum storage tank activities, just remediation certificates related to upstream oil and gas sites. You can see where the governance for this comes from, and again, that's not changing. ESRD will develop any policies, and like Tristan mentioned, we deliver the policies in the best and efficient manner that we can. It is voluntary, but it does provide clients with formal closure on sites that have been remediated. So that's really the carrot out there for industry. One of the issues potentially is, though, that it is only for the area that's been remediated, and I know you guys are familiar with that, but it is a three-dimensional area that's been cleaned up, meets and bounds in depth, and that is what the remediation certificate is for. You can't get a remediation certificate on an entire well site unless that entire well site, corner to corner and to depth, has been remediated and cleaned up. And I can't see that happening. It does certainly occur a lot on the downstream and the gas stations, and that's where, right now a lot of the value is seen. But on upstreams, maybe for pipeline releases, those types of things, where your company wants liability closure on that spill. They want something to show, to show the executive that, we spent a lot of money here, but this is what we've got, this is what we cleaned up. And we get absolute liability closure on that piece of land. So the protection is, if the guidelines change in the future, you are still protected. You have that cleaned up. You won't have to go back and reevaluate that area. So that's really what it's for, and AER is taking over the responsibility for issuance of that. The Reclamation Certificate Program, I know many of you are much more familiar with this. The intent is for lift and shift. So we will take the program as it is being delivered right now at ESRD, and we will move it into AER. There definitely is some changes that are occurring, and again, that relates more to the fact that we had SRD and we had environment, and things were handled a little bit differently. We operated under the same policy, but we didn't exactly do maybe the same things. So now is our time to help, streamline some of those activities. And really what this involves is, getting the reclamation applications, certificate applications, reviewing them as, non-routine or routine, making decisions, and that's something that the AER is definitely going to be doing. We will be making decisions. We won't be sitting on files for years and years, and we'll see what happens. We need to be able to make decisions and keep the file moving. So that hopefully is what you folks want to see out there. I think it really is, and I know we do have a large backlog in this area. We will be doing our best to work through that backlog. Another part of the program is canceling. If we do have failed audits, whether it be a surface audit or a subsurface audit, we will be canceling certificates if need be. The odd time we have to do amendments, if we screw up, I know it's hard to believe, but sometimes the regulator will screw up and maybe put the wrong legal address on something or some type of administrative error. The program makes those corrections as well. So this reclamation certificate, like I said, it's a formal closure. All specified land used for energy resource activity requires reclamation certification as an endpoint. Okay, so that is why this program is in place, basically. And the objective is to return land to an equivalent capability. Now, I'm not going to get into the definition of equivalent capability. I think everybody's got their own definition of it. But really what we want to see is that once industry is done with a piece of land, it's returned back to a state that is usable, possibly similar to what it was before, but it needs to fit into the landscape. It needs to be able to do whatever types of activities could have been done on that land previously. It doesn't need to be identical, but if it was boreal forest before, it should be boreal forest afterwards. And boreal forest is a lot of things. It's not just merchantable trees, right? It's wildlife habitat. It could be recreational use. So you can stretch a lot of different things out of what equivalent capability is. And I think the folks around the room here are pretty good at working through that and coming up with and getting land back to the most appropriate end land use. So we do have a lot of sites in the province that have been reclaimed, about 62,000 as of 2011, and you can see they're scattered throughout the province. So this program has been ongoing for a long time. Sites are being reclaimed. There is a lot more work to do, though. We have a lot of sites out there that are still sitting in an abandoned state that we need to get to final reclamation closure. So here's just a typical example of say a mountain site, large cut and fill, put back. We'll put the mountainside back. You guys will put the mountainside back. If you're going to cut it out and flip it over, you're going to end up having to put it back to the state that it was previously. So this is what the program really is all about. So for the most part, things are going to remain unchanged. The Wellsite Reclamation Certificate application form that is currently on the ESRD webpage, that will be the same. We've been doing a lot of rebranding of documents on ESRD's webpage. There shouldn't really be a lot of impact to you folks when you're going to do this work and fill out these forms. They are going to be the same documents. The application requirements are identical to what they were previous. We haven't made any significant changes at all. ESRD will continue to develop the policy, and the policy is the reclamation criteria, the 2010 reclamation criteria. That falls into the policy group. So ESRD will be working on that. Definitely AER, maybe we have some more of the subject matter experts when it comes to some of these land use types and such. It'll be imperative that we work with ESRD on development of good sound policy and directives as well. There is no application fees. Well, there's a big, huge win for you guys right now. So that $700 application fee has been waived. I think maybe you're paying for it some other way, but it has been waived. And similarly, the $1,000 remediation certificate has been waived, that fee. Now, what I really do not want to happen, that $700 was a very small QA/QC check in my mind, right? If you submitted something that was done in error, there was errors within it and we refused it, you would lose that money. That check is no longer in place. And the last thing I want is for you folks to test the system and to start sending in applications saying, you know what, there's no application fee. What's the real harm if it's rejected? There's no fee to me. Well, don't do that. Don't test the system, okay? We don't have anything in place right now, but if we see, listening to the folks yesterday from Environment and Operational Performance, if we see chronic failures, even if they're small chronic failures, we're going to have to address that somehow. So again, still do the best that you can, and I know you will. So like I said, ESRD will continue to develop the policies, and we at the Alberta Energy Regulator will implement these policies. Other policies, such as the Alberta Tier 1, the Alberta Tier 2 guidelines, and again, the reclamation criteria. Those are all ESRD documents, and they will work to update as needed. but we will work with them on those. Application fees. Like I said, we've got a lot of in-flight, in-progress application fees. If you've submitted reclamation certificate application fees and you haven't gotten your certificate yet, or you haven't gotten a response back, don't worry, you don't have to resubmit. They are in the queue. We've spent a lot of time, looking through ESRD offices, going through the databases. There was 2 separate databases, one for ESRD and one for SRD, and making sure that we've got all of these application submissions, and they will be transferred over to the AER, and the AER will work through them. So you do not have to resubmit. Like I said, they're in the queue, and they're already, in a, nothing is going to get bumped up in the queue. It's as they were submitted. So we have ones that were, submitted 6 months ago. They will get precedent over ones that are submitted today, right? There will be a bit of a blackout period, and don't fear that you need to get everything in right now before March 29th, because there may be some loss. Just continue on with your business as usual. Don't try and flood the system. We've got a lot of work to do, and we'll get through it. ESAR, the Environmental Site Assessment Repository, is still going to be in effect, and the Alberta Energy Regulator will have access to that. And as decisions are made on reclamation certificate applications, we will be updating ESAR, so they will be available for the public. We do have a lot of in-progress backlog sites. Again, we know this. We are working through it. We have got a bit of a plan in place how to address this, and it is our priority at closure liability. This will be one of our priorities to, in the immediate future, is to get through this backlog, because it's not fair to you folks that have submitted stuff, maybe a year. It's been sitting for a year. We need to get these things dealt with, because there is an impact to you guys, but there's also an impact to to Joe Albertan, right? We need to be able to get these sites closed off if appropriate. Approximately half of these in the queue are non-routine, and as you guys know, that does undergo a little bit more scrutiny, so it will take us some time. But again, our time is better spent looking at these sites than possibly answering questions from you folks as to where is my application that I submitted 6 months ago. So I ask you to, maybe give us a little bit of time to get our feet under us and to work through some of these things. If you do have really burning questions and such, by all means, we're there to answer the phone too. So, but let us work through some of these the backlogs that we have before you jump all over us. What are some changes? Well, I guess again the big thing right now is there's no reclamation certificate application fee. We will have email addresses where you can send in queries and questions. The Rem Rec Cert applications at AER.ca. It's not going to be in effect till March 29th. So again, get off your Blackberries. Don't send in questions right now. But where's your Rec app that was submitted 6 months ago? And then there is a difference in that notice of applications will be posted to AER's webpage, and notice of decisions will be posted to the webpage. So that is something new that wasn't currently done at ESRD. Again, there's no fees, and the settings within the Electronic Disposition System, which accepted the applications for public land, has been adjusted. The settings have been adjusted, so there should be no issues there for you folks. If there is, then certainly those are the kind of questions that we need to get from you, and we can make appropriate changes as needed. Under RETA, that's where the notification requirements are, and that is why these will be posted to the AER webpage. There is an opportunity for statement of concerns from affected individuals, and again, notice of decision on, will be posted to the webpage. That's for reclamation certificates that have been issued. The field audit, we will be conducting audits just as they were previously with ESRD. We were striving for 15% audit of certified sites, and we will still strive for that. Approximately 10% of that would be surface audits conducted by our field inspectors or field assessors, and approximately 5% will be conducted by subsurface audits. Now, since there's no fee attached to the rec certificates, that fee historically was used to fund the subsurface audits. Where that'll go in the future now, we'll need to budget internally for the subsurface audits. And what that does is it gives us a lot more flexibility. Some of you may know, certainly those that were involved with the audit, we were really under the gun at ESRD because we needed to spend that money the same year it was collected. And what it ended up was all of the audits were done in the winter months. It was bitter cold. It was miserable. We were out there collecting information. I felt really bad for the folks out in the field, but I was fine myself. But I think they were a bit miserable, and they, you know, since we can budget for this, and since we can do a little bit better planning, there are a lot of areas in the province we can do these subsurface audits any time of the year, and I think this gives us a lot more flexibility out there. So this is certainly going to be a win for us and you guys. Any failed audits certainly could result in a cancellation of the certificate. There are other things that can be done, and we certainly have, you know, worked with industry if we have some failed audits that are, you know, somewhat maybe insignificant in nature, but we've got maybe a hit that needs to be reevaluated. Sometimes it makes more sense, rather than just canceling the certificate, to actually work with you guys. We've got you in, you know, indoors, and we've got the application. Rather than just cancel and send you out and you can apply whenever you want later on, we would rather work with you to get the issue resolved and get the certificate, you know, keep the certificate intact. Appeals. The appeal process is changing and will be ready for proclamation. And I believe they talked a little bit more about this yesterday at the Environment and Operational Performance. But you know, basically an appeal is available anytime a decision is made. So when a reclamation certificate is issued or canceled or refused, those are areas where an appeal is possible. And again, I have an email here that questions about that certainly can go to that email. Hopefully it's accurate. And then the Orphan Well program. This is the fifth part of the Rec Rem program. The Orphan Well Association is still in place. What ESRD did was sites that no viable owner was in place, they would do some investigation to make sure that there's no interest working partners, make sure that it is actually an orphan site, and if so, then it would be moved or recommended to the Orphan Well Association for additional work. So hopefully by moving it from ESRD to AER, it will just be a little bit more streamlined, maybe a little bit more efficient. So there again, there's a lot of sites out there that are potential orphans, and I would say potential because the investigation hasn't been conducted to find out if there is an interested or a viable working partner on those sites. So this is now my slides for you folks. How can you help us through this transition phase? The main thing is be patient, be cooperative, and I think, you know, up until now certainly things have been very cooperative. There are a lot of backlogs. We are setting some priorities, and we will be working through those backlogs. Some of those backlogs are a little bit ballooned from what maybe they should be, because as you know, during this transition, we've lost a lot of ESRD field staff. Some we've hired, some have retired, but the numbers have really dropped as far as the field inspectors over the past year at not only environment but SRD as well. And so we do have a backlog, and we will work through it. But hopefully this whole thing will result in some improved efficiencies, you know, saving time and money to industry. And the responsibility for this, it's not just AER staff that need to make this work. You guys need to make this work with us and work with us. So this is a slide we always see on presentations about this, you know, reclaimed and abandoned sites. My message to you guys is we need to close this gap, and we don't need to necessarily close this gap by having more rec certificates issued. This isn't about timeliness or reclamation. What it's about is it's perception. Our reclaimed on here is sites that have been issued reclamation certificate. That is what we consider reclaimed once it's issued a reclamation certificate. I know that there's a lot of sites out there that work is being done on. They may be reclaimed as far as, you know, the landscape, the soils, and they're awaiting, you know, maybe a few years of vegetation. Those aren't represented in this graph at all. So when the public sees this graph, they see this huge gap, and it's like, what is industry doing? Why aren't they doing anything out there? Well, I know that you guys are doing things. The problem is that that message isn't getting out to Joe Public about all of the work that's being done, all of the sites that reclamation's being done, maybe remediation is ongoing, maybe it's just at the phase 1 stage. We need to somehow work through getting this information to Joe Public so that, you know, it puts a better light on the entire program, I think. So this is my, you know, I don't know how we can do it, but we need to be able to do it. And going forward, what can you expect? Well, again, we're going to be striving for efficiency within the AER. We are going to be making decisions. We're not going to be sitting on files. We will listen to your suggestions. You guys are, for the most part, the experts out there. So if you've got some suggestions on how we can be more efficient and more effective, certainly let us know. We don't know everything. We know 98%, but we don't know everything. So you guys, we rely on you guys to help us, make this a success. And we will certainly respond to your concerns. So maybe it's a good time to bring some concerns.